If I go to the hospital because I have appendicitis, I'm called a patient, right? And a patient is someone with an illness who's receiving care and help, right? But if I have depression or anxiety, what does the therapist call me? What does the insurance call me? A consumer, a customer, a client. They really don't use the term patient. And why is that? Well, I think that that's part of the way we've eroded mental health care. We've actually seen mental health care, especially in the West, as more of a luxury item for enhancing your life and not as an essential part of care and physical health.
This is By Joyan Season 2. I'm your host, Joyan Chan, and every Wednesday we bring you inspiring stories, powerful message, and fun conversations with me and my special guests and friends, and it's my personal mission to empower you to live and lead a life with joy. This podcast is for you if you're looking for more joy, courage, passion, and purpose in your life. Now let's dive into today's episode and get ready to laugh, learn, and live your life to the fullest. Our guest today integrates trauma-informed psychotherapy, including internal family systems and EMDR, with thoughtful medication management to help LGBTQ and spiritually injured clients heal without losing who they are. He's making mental health care more human, more affirming, and more accessible by taking a holistic approach to mental health, incorporating therapy, lifestyle interventions, acupuncture, and psychopharmacology when needed. He's also a PhD student at Wayne State University, where he's studying the harmful effects of conversion therapy, also known as reparative therapy and sexual orientation/gender identity change efforts, and how people can recover from those experiences. So guys, help me in welcoming the psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and the founder of Live Psychiatry in Michigan, Doyle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love sharing about mental health and trauma recovery and just spreading awareness that there is hope, like life does not have to hurt, but there are so many things and so many places where we can grow and find health and healing in our lives.
Yeah, that is really beautiful and it's so important, the work that you do. So I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you do to help us, humanity. And yeah. So let's start with your background. Why are you so passionate about everything that you do, everything that I mentioned in your bio? Like, what first got you into this industry?
Yeah, so I think there were a few things. I've always been interested in psychology and just being present with people who are hurting. I started off my career in emergency medical services as a paramedic, worked in the emergency department as well as on a 911 ambulance for a while, and then eventually found my way into nursing and really found that just some of the most rewarding parts of what I got to do was not so much the medical procedural aspects of things, but it was really the human connection that we got to share when I would just have the privilege to be invited into someone's life who was genuinely hurting and in a vulnerable position and needed another human who could walk alongside them while they were navigating something that was oftentimes very scary and overwhelming. And so from there, I did some work actually in the emergency department and in public safety, helping first responders and nurses recover from some of the traumatic things that they experience on the job and at work. And from there, really just continued to grow. Eventually went back to school, earned a master's degree, and completed the specialty training to be a psychiatric nurse practitioner.
Did you personally have to go through any trauma? That's what I'm trying to ask. And how did you eventually heal from it?
Yes. So I think that, everyone on the planet, even when we come from the best families and the best circumstances, we all experience some sort of emotional injury. I don't think anybody gets out of this life completely unscathed. Now, certainly that kind of exists along a spectrum. I certainly want to honor the fact that, right, there are certain people that have experiences that are certainly more repetitive, and just seem to be much more difficult than others. But on the same token, I think that like trauma is just a part of the human experience, and emotional pain is part of the human experience, and that's something we all have in common. And I'm no different from that. I grew up in a very Christian conservative household and had to come to terms with the fact that I was gay. And then that wasn't going to be something that was acceptable in my family or in my faith tradition, and really had to spend a lot of time figuring out, how do I have my own place in the world?
Yeah.
How do I be okay with myself? How do I navigate spirituality? And so there was that component of my life. And then, of course, working as a nurse and a paramedic, I experienced my fair share of incidents that really haven't left me, that will probably stick with me for the rest of my life. I wouldn't say that they're particularly troublesome anymore in that they don't really intrude into my life. But certainly when you sign up to do things like that and to be in those situations, there's going to be some traumas and things that were particularly painful.
So if you don't mind me asking, just a follow-up question. So what did you, because you mentioned it, you didn't have a place in the world, like you didn't know who you are. And I'm not sure whether your family accepted your true identity, because I have friends, I have many gay friends. I love them, And this particular friend, he's so scared to tell his father that he's gay for years. And I've been encouraging him. He's just got to tell him one day you can't hide forever, right? It's not who you are. And you're getting older, your parents want you to get married, and it's not going to happen, right? You got to tell him. So what would you say to people who are still struggling to like really share who they really are, whether it's with their family or even just their friends, they're out of the closet?
In the Christian faith tradition, there is this parable that Jesus tells about throwing pearls to swine or pearls to pigs. And I think about that every time I'm faced with this question of like, do I come out to other people? Do I share this with someone in my life who might not be very accepting or who might be very damaging? And I don't want people to hear me calling their families swine or pigs. That's not what I'm saying. But I think the purpose of Jesus telling that story is to say, listen, there are very valuable things that we all have that are part of ourselves. And it doesn't make any sense to give those valuable things, to share that value that we have inside of us with people who are just going to trample all over it and treat it like it's just another day at the mud pit. And I think when I talk to, it's a question that so many people who are sexual and gender minorities have is, who do I tell? How do I know when it's safe to tell them? And I think the first thing is you can follow your heart. You can follow your emotions and feelings. If it doesn't feel safe, there's probably a reason it doesn't feel safe. Our nervous systems are there to keep us safe and keep us alive. And so if our nervous system is sending those alarm bells saying, no, 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 don't do this, I think we can get ourselves into a lot of painful positions by just trying to override that. Now, I'm not saying that we don't sometimes have to do things that are difficult and that are against what we would comfortably want to do. But I do think we really need to take heed when our body and our nervous system is saying, hey, this is concerning, this doesn't feel right. I'll say for myself, it's a journey. I think that oftentimes children forget that their parents are doing life for the first time as well. We're all trying to figure out how to navigate a world that can be very tough and just very painful and brutal. And that's probably the understatement of the day. And so are parents going to respond poorly? Certainly some do. And we've all heard stories of parents responding poorly. And that's not okay. It's not right. But I also think, like, as outsiders, we ought to step back and just say for a second, well, everybody's trying to figure this out. And when I say this, I just mean life as on the whole. We all have cultural backgrounds and spiritual beliefs and values that are going to shape the way that we respond to things that are shocking or we aren't expecting. And so our parents are no different from that. Um, for your friends and just for my friends who are wrestling with this issue of do I share with my family? I think it starts off with really checking in with yourself and asking inside, what doesn't feel good about doing this? And just honoring that. We don't have to act on all of our feelings, but we can at least listen to them. And I think taking that moment to just listen, to hear, oh, this is what I'm worried about. I'm worried about my father reacting like this, or my mother saying this, because those things would be very hurtful. Like, those are very human things. Like, that's so natural. And once you get in touch with that, I think that will give some clarity on, okay, if I tell them, what support do I need? Maybe that's a good time to talk to a sibling of, hey, this is what I think is going to come up for me when I talk to dad. Can you be there to support me in this way? Or, what do you think I should say if he responds like this? I think that, that's kind of a roundabout way of answering the question. But I really just would say honor how you're feeling. We have to honor what we're thinking and feeling and move forward in a way that doesn't feel coercive.
No, I think you answered it beautifully. I'm gonna send this to my friends after this episode is released, because I think of course you are the expert, right, in the field. Yeah, so let's talk about your work. It blends trauma informed psychotherapy and medication management. And earlier you mentioned that um sometimes people don't need medication, right? All they need maybe is therapy, talk therapy, or any other modalities. So how do you decide when it is a medication issue versus a nervous systems, like you said, trauma issue, and how do you decide what each client needs?
That's a great question. And I think if I got it right 100% of the time, I would publish a book and a YouTube series and be a millionaire and never work another day. Because I think the fact of the matter is humans are so complicated. We're so complicated. So I know I have my approach. I'll be the first to admit I don't think that I get it right 100% of the time. But I also think if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything tends to look like a nail. And having some additional tools in the toolbox to think about things from not only a physiological standpoint and a neurobiological standpoint, but also from a psychological standpoint and just a brain structure and cognitive structuring standpoint, as well as a spiritual standpoint, are all important pieces that play into the way I work with clients and help them navigate some of these things. I don't think that there is necessarily a dichotomy or a split between do we do medicine or do we just do therapy? When we think about our experiences in life, and when we look at the research and the brain imaging studies and the functional MRIs and all of the wealth of data that's out there, we know that traumatic experiences or formative experiences in life leave imprints on our nervous system. And those imprints on our nervous system are not just benign thoughts. Like if you think about it, what is a thought? I mean, a thought is a set of interconnected neurons and pathways in the brain that are wired together and are firing together. And so even if a behavior or feeling might be coming from a dysfunctional thought, there is still a real sense in which that thought is intertwined with our biology and our brain makeup and our brain chemistry. And I think so often for clients, it's really, we want to take a step back and look at, okay, how are we suffering right now? How are we hurting? Where is that? How is that showing up for us? Where is that showing up for us? I mean, so many times we actually feel our emotions in places in our bodies. And just asking and being curious, like, where's that showing up? And then assessing the level of distress that is causing. As we kind of dig and we just gently begin to answer some of these questions and have some of these conversations, usually it becomes pretty naturally apparent whether or not a medicine is going to play a role in being able to help us restore some function and some healthy brain activity. There was a study done that I read recently that looked at victims of childhood sexual abuse, and it asked them to do a public speaking engagement. And they split the group into two people, a group of healthy folks who had never experienced that type of trauma, and then, of course, the group of people who had experienced that trauma. And what the researchers did is they had them go public speak, which is very stressful for every human, but then they drew their blood for several minutes and hours after they had spoken, and they measured their cortisol levels or their stress hormone levels. And the people who had been subjected to childhood abuse had much more dramatic releases of cortisol and stress hormone in their body. Like their bodies were literally responding in a different way than their peers who had not had that same experience. And I think that points to the way that our traumas and experiences leave lasting imprints on our nervous system. And so I would be hesitant to tell that person who comes to me and says, Carter, I panic when I'm public speaking, but I have to for my job, or I have to for my schooling. And we talk and we learn that they've been victims of some sort of other trauma or abuse, or maybe it was just they were made fun of for the way that they talked in school. Maybe they were a first-generation immigrant. Maybe English or the language that they were going right wasn't their language. Like those are all experiences. And so, we would want to honor that experience of that person, but that also can tell us, okay, maybe there's a level of biological dysfunction that's now occurring in the present day that could benefit from medicine to make things less intense in the here and now. And maybe that could even open up some of the doors for us to do better work in therapy to depolarize some of these really difficult memories. So for many people, I think it's a yes and approach. It's a, yes, we do therapy. Yes, we do medicine. And we think of everything holistically. And we try to move forward in a way that's going to help reduce distress and help people really heal.
So when clients come to you, where do you start with them? And how does, what does a session with you look like? Because you mentioned your approach, you take a very holistic approach in mental health and healing trauma. So what does a session look like with you? And where do you usually start with them?
That's a great question. And it almost feels like a cop-out to say, but it usually depends. I ask patients to complete some very thorough intake paperwork just so I can get a sense of where they're coming from and maybe what they're bringing into the session. Certainly I honor, and I want to know if, is this going to be an uncomfortable encounter because maybe they've had bad experiences with people who identify as males. And I try to be prepared as I can for some of these things. But really the way that I would say is have you seen Ted Lasso? On Netflix, not on Netflix, on Apple TV, the TV show. But Ted Lasso was the star of this show, and he said something in one of the episodes that I really align myself with, and it's be curious, not judgmental. And I think that is so wise. And that's the way that I approach my initial encounters with patients. I try to be as curious as I can. I try not to be judgmental. I'm human, so I'm not going to say that I do that perfectly. Of course, my brain is sometimes thinking, oh my gosh, those shoes don't match. But I try not to hold it against people. But usually, so on the intake, we'll start off with a thorough history. I like to know where people have come from, what growing up was like for them, what their perception of the present problem that they're coming to me with is, how that problem got started, the history behind it, kind of its trajectory, whether it's gotten better or worse or ebbed and flowed, the time frame on which that's occurred. And I also like to look back on what's been your overall functioning in life look like. What did growing up in school look like? How did you do academically? How do you do at work? How do you do with friends, family, religious and faith communities, community in general? What does all of that look like? And how are you kind of coming to where we're at today? And then from there, I really try to take a tailored approach. I have really been strongly influenced by internal family systems therapy, really the psychotherapeutic framework that I feel I'm most grounded in and most of my work starts from. And it's rooted in this idea that there's no bad parts, but that, the idea that there is just one Carter is correct, except Carter is more complicated than that. Like, there were parts of Carter that wanted to sit down and do this podcast, and then there were parts of Carter that wanted to go eat a smoothie and, watch Netflix. And human behavior and emotion is more complex, but we can get to know some of these parts of us. The parts of us that want to do things, the parts of us that don't, the parts of us that have intense emotions and fears. And from there, as we get to know the parts of each other and what's coming into the scenario and what's bringing them into counseling and therapy.
Sorry to interrupt. Before we go even further, just explain what internal family systems is to people who might not have heard of this concept before.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for stopping me there.
No worries.
Internal family systems therapy was kind of discovered by Richard Schwartz. He really goes by Dick Schwartz nowadays. And it is this idea that at the core of every human being, there is this energy or this soul, this like centered part of who we are and of every person that holds this tremendous capacity for human connection and compassion and calm and curiosity and clarity. And I think in many faith traditions has been called like the soul or the spirit. In internal family systems therapy, it's often referred to as the self or the true self. But it is this idea that there is kind of this core to us that holds this very positive, loving, flowing energy that sustains us. I think in traditional Chinese medicine, it would have been called qi. So many cultures have had a concept for in IFS what we would call the self or self energy. But as we grow up in IFS, we understand that self energy can become restricted or covered up by parts of us that develop because of fear and trauma and pain that we've experienced in life. And so in IFS, to really kind of give the quick 1,000-foot overview, we have the idea that there's this self energy at the core of every human being, but then we all have parts. And there's parts of us that are exiles. Those are the parts of us that we bury deep down inside and we try to keep from ever coming forward. Like, they're the parts of us that hold the painful memories, the things that would be emotionally overwhelming if we thought about them or if they came charging into our life unexpectedly. We also have parts of us that are managers. They proactively keep us rolling in the world. They proactively keep those exiled parts of us from coming back forth and taking over, but they proactively keep us going. Many times we have managers, or managerial parts that are organized, or are caretakers of other people. And finally, we have this third category of parts that we call firefighters. The idea behind a firefighter is just that, like a firefighter, they respond to perceived emergencies. For many people, firefighters can be things like alcohol use or substance use, but it is like the rapid response team in our life that gets called when we start to experience something overwhelming. The firefighters show up to try to extinguish that painful stimuli. And so in IFS, we have this idea that we have these complex inner worlds that are working to keep us functioning in life. But sometimes those parts of us can take on extreme roles that are rooted in ideas that come from the past that may not necessarily be as relevant anymore. So for instance, many people will discover that they have a manager part, a part of them that's always trying to find love from someone else, to find affirmation, to find acceptance, And that's so normal. We all need that.
Yeah.
But if that manager learned to do that because your parental figure didn't show you love and affection, we all have seen how that can lead to some very unhealthy behaviors into adult life. And in IFS, we take this very gentle approach to getting to know these parts of ourselves, to know these parts of others, to honor the roles and the things that they're trying to do, and then work to create a system, an internal world that flows with peace and harmony, and that is not made up of lots of polarization and internal fighting.
Well, thank you so much for explaining it. So the other part of your work, other than internal family systems, is EMDR, right? So again, what is EMDR? And it has a reputation for being intense, right? So where does it fit for clients with complex or spiritual trauma, and where do you not use it?
Yeah, EMDR is one of the best evidenced psychotherapies for trauma. And the idea behind EMDR is that, so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. And it comes from, that name is probably a little bit antiquated and old, because originally in EMDR, the therapist would have the client do rapid eye movements back and forth, similar to like what we're doing when we're sleeping in REM sleep. That's part of the idea behind EMDR, at least originally, was that in REM sleep, the brain is recategorizing memories. It's taking memories from like our RAM, right, that short-term storage, and putting them into the filing cabinet for long-term storage. Well, in victims of trauma, sometimes those memories get stuck in the RAM, right? They don't actually get filed away appropriately. So we're always kind of reactivating those memories and tripping over them, and they're intruding into our life. So one of the original hypotheses behind EMDR is, well, if REM sleep, that rapid eye movement sleep, gets memories to be stored in the filing cabinet versus in the RAM, or the short-term memory, what if, while we had clients think about their trauma, we stimulated rapid bilateral eye movements to try to stimulate the hippocampus, or the part of the brain that would refile those memories? Now, what we found in years and years of subsequent research in EMDR is that actually we don't need just eye movements. It was really discovered in working with clients who had visual impairments and couldn't track rapid lateral eye movements. Well, what we found is that those clients could actually receive bilateral stimulation, so tactile stimulation, whether it's tapping on themselves or a therapist tapping gently on them, or holding vibrating buzzers that are alternating back and forth. And in EMDR, we help clients to recall some of these memories. We generate that bilateral stimulation, whether it's with rapid eye movements or with rapid tactile sensations. And we help the brain's adaptive information processing ability kick back in and take that memory and remove it from a structure or kind of a scaffolding where it's being mapped onto present moments, and instead move that memory into a place where it is truly a memory, something that has happened to us in the past, but doesn't have to be re-experienced in the present. It can be very intense.
It is.
It
sounds intense. Right.
Yes. And I say, so many things in life that are well worth it are some of the most difficult things we'll have to do. Childbirth comes to mind. Just some of the things that really give us the highest reward can be hard. And EMDR is one of those things. Any sort of psychotherapy can be very hard. It is hard work. Working on yourself is hard. I'll say for EMDR, because it is more of an experiential therapy, it actually can be easier for clients than more traditional talk therapies, where the client has to sit there and tell the therapist about every gory, painful detail of the memory. In EMDR, the therapist is more of a guide, helping that memory to be guided into activation and reprocessed. And the client doesn't have to share details about the memory. They just have to experience that with the presence of the therapist who can help guide them through this process. And so, I mean, that's intense. I don't want to sugarcoat it. That can be very hard. I think it's a great therapy for people who have gotten stuck in regular therapies or in other more typical talk psychotherapies. In my own work, I integrate that into my overall internal family systems framework, really by kind of using it as a tool where if we get to some parts that are really stuck or really rigid and really don't want to move, or we kind of discover some memories and some neural networks that are just kind of stuck in there and we're kind of feeling like we just can't get past them. Sometimes EMDR reprocessing can help give us a little bit more space and can help those memories become less intense and less charged so we can better integrate them into our life and into the future templates we have for where we go in the future. So it is not easy, but I would really encourage anyone, if you have experienced something that's traumatic and it's stuck with you, or you have a sense that there are things in your life that are still causing you pain, talk to an EMDR therapist. See if there's things that they could offer that would help you. In my experience, it's been life-changing for myself and so many patients.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It's really, it's a lot of information. It's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
So what do you think is missing? Again, you take a holistic approach in mental health care. What do you think is missing from your perspective, in mainstream general, the mental health system today? And what is missing and what needs to change?
Oh, that is such a good question. I hesitate and I'm just thinking because I think that there's so much that needs to change.
Wow.
You know, um, anyone, right? I mean, we all see folks in our own communities who are struggling probably
Yeah.
every day. Whether it's folks who are unhoused and homeless, whether it's our neighbors who are struggling with relationships and children. There are just so many places that I see every day, and I see folks who are really struggling, and it can be so hard to get care. One of the things, and I guess one of my soapboxes, if I can call it that, is I think that we've commodified mental health care, especially in the United States. And I'll give you one example of what I mean by that. If I go to the hospital because I have appendicitis, I'm called a patient, right? And a patient is someone with an illness who's receiving care and help, right? But if I have depression or anxiety, what does the therapist call me? What does the insurance call me? A consumer, a customer, a client. They really don't use the term patient. And why is that? Well, I think that that's part of the way we've eroded mental health care. We've actually seen mental health care, especially in the West, as more of a luxury item for enhancing your life and not as an essential part of care and physical health. And mental health and physical health are no different. Like the brain is an organ. It is just as valid as a liver disease or any other organ in our body. And I think that that's one of the hugest ways that we've kind of gone astray in the West and in the United States is by removing or making mental health care more of a bougie or boutique thing that is somehow optional. I mean, there's a joke that I hear a lot of therapists say, and I've even said it myself. There's two kinds of therapists in the US. There's therapists that have stopped taking commercial insurance, and there are therapists who will stop taking insurance. And that's just because of the way insurance companies, Medicaid, many of these bureaucracies that people rely on to afford care make it so difficult for clinicians to actually provide that care to patients who need it the most.
Yeah. So what are some of the green flags or red flags that people should look out for, when they are choosing a mental health provider?
That's a really great question. And I think the first red flag to look out for is, how do you feel with this person? when you walk into the room, or I know so many people receive care via telehealth and Zoom and video meetings, so when that clinician comes on the camera or you walk into their office, how do you feel? Like, do you feel safe with them? Does it feel like this is a person you could share with and would be a safe, or does it feel like they would be unsafe? And they could be the most wonderful clinician in the world. But if you don't feel safe with them, I think you're going to have a lot of trouble making progress because it's just going to be harder for you to share. So almost even before I would say like a red flag, I mean, maybe it is a red flag, but it's more of a personal red flag. If you don't feel safe or you don't feel like it's someone you can talk to, then maybe that's a good sign. You should just look around and see who else is there. I would always caution people against reading too many reviews on the internet. Remember, in mental health care, we are oftentimes taking care of people who are really struggling. And some of the patients we care for have quite severe illnesses. And because of that, there are oftentimes things that get left on the internet by a lot of times our patients who are quite severely ill. And I mean, honestly, sometimes patients that weren't that ill, but are just struggling, and might say things that are more negative than is actually true about how that clinician actually practices. And I don't fault patients for doing that. Like, I know that they're coming to see me because they're hurting. I really don't hold it against people, but I just say as a general rule, don't be scared away from someone because there might be a couple negative reviews of them on the internet. If you've talked to friends or family or people you trust and you've gotten a referral saying this is a good person, it's probably worth at least having an initial meeting. I would say other red flags, probably the biggest red flag that I kind of look for is like, I try to stay away from anybody who I feel like is going to be very dogmatic, or is really going to have kind of a set agenda for what they believe you should be doing. And that can, of course, come from a variety of places and show up in a variety of ways. Of course, green flags to me, I'm a little bit biased, but therapists who have been trained by the Internal Family Systems Institute, IFSI, they tend to be quite well trained and are, I'm yet to have a bad experience with a therapist who's been through that level of training. I look and I would oftentimes ask people, or I would suggest that patients ask when you're talking to a potential new therapist, ask them what types of continuing education they've done. What have they done to kind of further their competency and their career? If their answer is, well, I graduated school 10 years ago, and they can't really point to much else that they've done to grow, might be a red flag. But if somebody says, well, I go to conferences and maybe I even speak at conferences and I attend case reviews and supervision, those are all great signs to me that this therapist could be someone that you really benefit from working with.
The industry continues to grow and, everything is changing so rapidly fast. Like, you're still starting, right? You're continuously doing your research and, because there's always new things coming up, right?
Exactly.
So for people who are listening to this episode today, who might have experienced maybe religious trauma, identity crisis, identity suppression, or just, general shame around who they are, what is the first step you would want them to take towards healing?
I think the first step to take towards healing is just asking that question. Like, what is the first step I need to take? If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, I love to go to the Grand Canyon every year. It reminds me of just, how big the universe and the world is. But if you ever stand at the bottom of the Grand Canyon and look up, it feels like you're going to die because they're so far you have to go to get back to civilization, to get back to everything else in your life. But it's actually really easy to get out of the bottom of the Grand Canyon. You just take one step at a time. And if you focus on the next step, you can actually walk out from the bottom. You can be at the Colorado River You can be back on the rim within a matter of a few hours, but it just doesn't look that way.
Yeah.
All you have to do is take the next step. And so asking that question for many people, I think, is the first step that they have to take. It's like, what is the healing that I need? What is the next step, or what is the direction I need to go? From there, I would just encourage folks to be curious about themselves. Instead of being upset or frustrated, like, angry or disappointed about their depression or anxiety or anger or whatever it is that's troubling them, instead, try to offer some gentle curiosity towards yourself. And not asking in an accusatory or judgmental way, but asking just gently, like, I wonder what this depression is trying to get my attention for. I wonder what it wants me to know. I wonder what role it's trying to accomplish or play in my life. And those same questions could be applicable to anxiety, anger, all sorts of troubles people face. And then I think looking for some people who can come alongside you that can be genuinely curious with you and not judgmental and not be coming at you with an agenda to force you to change or force you into a mold, but instead can just help you begin to untangle all of the experience that you're having inside of you. That would really be the first couple of steps. Certainly there are books and podcasts and reading, and so many things we can all do to make our lives better. But I think asking some of those questions will help give you a good orientation on which way you probably need to continue to move to grow.
Yeah, because like you said, right, it's all about taking the first step, and then just by taking it one step at a time, you will reach your destination, right? Whatever that is. So,
Yeah.
Carter, thank you so much for coming and for this very deeply insightful and grounding conversation. You share so many tips and information that's even new to me. So now tell my people, if they want to take their first step with you, if they want to learn more about what you do and even explore the options of working with you, what are some of the options? What do you offer?
So everyone around the world can check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Try to post content that's relevant and helpful. You can find me at Carter, so just my first name, and then PMHNP, which stands for Psychiatric Mental Health Nurse Practitioner. It's my board certification. So Carter, PMHNP on the social media side. My practice right now, my private practice is Leaf Psychiatry. So Leaf, like a tree leaf, Leaf. And I have a blog on there. Folks that are interested in working with me clinically can reach out through my website. We have a patient intake form as well as our phone number, a way to schedule an appointment if you'd like to meet with me. I'll note that because of legal requirements, if patients are looking to receive clinical services from me, right now I can only accept patients from Hawaii, Arizona, and Michigan. Because we have to be licensed in the state the patient is physically located in at the time of the appointment. But if folks are curious and they feel like they really resonated with what I'm sharing and they'd like to reach out and learn more, or maybe they would like to be pointed in the direction of another therapist that has a similar approach, I'm always happy to provide those referrals and help get people pointed in the right direction there.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Is there anything else that you really want to talk about? Perhaps I didn't ask you, didn't let you.
I love the conversation that we've had. I think the only, the thing that I would just want to leave folks with is systems that lack integration tend to end in chaos or rigidity. And so if you're noticing that there are places in your life where you feel very chaotic, or perhaps places in your life that feel rigid and so rigid that you can't navigate them, those are some good places to begin to get curious about and seek someone who can maybe come alongside and help you begin to be curious about, how do I better integrate as a person? How do I begin to navigate the world in a more fluid and wholesome way?
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much again for coming and sharing so generously with me and my listeners today. Now, guys, I hope this conversation gives you the permission to heal with compassion. And if today's episode resonated with you, please reach out to Carter, talk to someone you trust, or explore the modalities that we discussed on the show. You don't have to walk this path alone. And if you want to connect with Carter, like you said, you can learn more about his research, his work. You'll find all the links and resources I'll put in the show note below. Thanks for listening. I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Thank you again for tuning into Find Joy Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a screenshot and share it on your IG story and tag findjoyjoyan_podcast so I know you are listening. And leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already done so. And remember to hit the subscribe button whether you are listening on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or any of your other favorite platforms. If you love what we are doing and want to become one of our sponsors, you can send me a DM to connect. And thanks for being here. I will see you soon in the next episode.